My name is Brian Holenka. I'm the lead combat designer for World of Warcraft, so responsible for class design and PvP.
And I'm Graham Berger, a senior game designer on World of Warcraft, also on the combat team with Brian, and I've been part of the team working on the Drakthir Evoker.
So can you folks talk about how much work, because I think there's a misconception, how much work it is when you create a new class in the World of Warcraft, because I feel like in every expansion, players are banging their, we want X class, we want new class, but I know there's a ton, like with your deep dive mount video, there's a ton of work that goes into that. Can you give us a brief overview of how complicated and intuitive that process is?
Sure, yeah. Making a new class for WoW is a big undertaking. Going into Dragonflight, like years ago when we were talking about what do we want the expansion to be, knowing, okay, we want you to be a playable dragon. That sounds really cool. How do we even accomplish that? And throwing around different ideas. Maybe it's a playable race. You can be a dragon, we'll give you like a fire breath and a tail swipe, and that'll be neat. That doesn't really like fulfill the fantasy. Okay, if we want to let you do all these draconic things, more than just breathe fire, we want to let you fly. Can we make a class that's dragon inspired? That's cool too, but if I don't have wings, if I don't have horns and ears and all that, it's not gonna hit it. Okay, let's do both. Let's make it a race and a class, this combined thing, really everything we need to deliver on the fantasy of being a dragon. Okay, suddenly we're adding a new race, a new class, a ton of new abilities, and as with everything in WoW, we want to always be pushing forward. What can we do differently with this class? How do we make it feel new and fresh while still feeling true to how World of Warcraft plays? You see that with the Empower spells. New type of spell added to the game. I don't know that we've done that ever since Classic. We've had our casts and our channels, but the idea of this is an all new kind of input system and a new way of thinking about how you cast, that was a big deal. That's something we had almost from day one as a vague notion, like, okay, we want to get the feeling of inhaling and preparing and then releasing a breath of fire, but the steps all along the way to get there, it took a ton of engineering time to get the new tech in place, a ton of work from our animators and our VFX artists to make it look and feel as kind of visceral and physical as it does, and some work from the design side to come up with the mechanics and sort of say, what are these spells actually accomplishing that are going to flow with the rest of your gameplay, that isn't just be awesome and look cool and breathe fire. So big team effort from not only kind of the Drakthir team itself, but really all of the World of Warcraft team to play test and give us feedback and give us ideas. We held brainstorming sessions at the very start that were all about just what makes dragons really cool in World of Warcraft, in other media, and pulling out of that to decide what we wanted to do for the Drakthir. But yeah, it takes a lot of work from a lot of people to make something like this come to life.
What did your team learn? Like from, I see a lot of the Demon Hunter and the Drakthir a lot. Like you're trying to make combat more reactive, more actiony. Like that does not go unnoticed, and it goes really appreciated. We've come a long way from standing in a stagnant area, casting spells, and then occasionally moving out of an AoE. Like it's so reactive now. It's like, what did you learn specifically from the Demon Hunter hero class that you brought over to Drakthir to improve on that reactive system?
Mm-hmm. Demon Hunter was, I think, a big step forward for World of Warcraft. The double jump alone was kind of this eye-opening moment for us and for players of, oh, the world can feel more alive, more interactive than it ever has before. Demon Hunter's like Fell Rush and the double jump and kind of all the acrobatic melee stuff they're doing. When we were going to make Evoker, it was, how do we do that for casters? As you were saying, right, a mage or a warlock, you're kind of standing there planted. Yeah. Now, they have mobility spells, but how do we bring a little bit of that action feeling to make the play space feel more dynamic, make you feel more engaged with your positioning, while also, again, feeling like a World of Warcraft character, staying true to that, the global cooldown, kind of the metronome of combat, giving our players time to make decisions and to react to things, and finding the middle ground between there was challenging, but an interesting process. So yeah, I think Evoker is kind of building on what Demon Hunter started, of how do we evolve World of Warcraft combat, for sure.
Now, Brian, the talent trees are coming back. This has been something that a lot of players have wanted to bring back since they took away. Like, was there any pressure to doing that? Like bringing back these really character-driven, like individual choice talent trees?
No, it was kind of the perfect convergence of two big elements. I think the first was the release of Classic, and the team playing the game, going out leveling, and just going through that experience again and earning a talent point. and being like, huh, that there was something to that, right? Like there was something to the idea of like, I get a point every level and I make a choice and I kind of chisel away at like who my character is going to be, and having just that kind of recurring moment of making a decision about your character. And then just honestly, even last expansion, the team was starting to talk about, hey, it would be good to revisit the talent trees, right? We made the talent row system back in Miss Pandaria. I want to say we added 2 rows, I think, over the course of following expansions, but we stopped adding rows, right? We didn't like bring that up to 10 rows, and so it felt like the system wasn't able to expand, and so it wasn't doing anything. It wasn't lifting any weight for us anymore, and so felt like this was the right time to just make a change to the talent trees. So it was really interesting how it all came about. We had some designers working on ideas and coming up with prototypes, and we were examining them, but we weren't getting at something we really wanted. So I actually asked my leads, like, hey, I just want to take my team offline for 3 days to just talk talents, and that's what we did. Everybody stopped doing work, and no one could contact us, and it was almost like a Zoom offsite for 3 days. And the first day we just talked about what do we want what are the design pillars, what are the things we want our talent system to accomplish. And then we spent another part of the day just looking at all kinds of games out there, World of Warcraft, Diablo, Path of Exile, all kinds of games that have had talent systems in the past. And kind of looked at what we liked about them, what we didn't like them. People presented them and talked about it, and we had questions and things, and we got a big understanding of all of these games out there and what they had done. And then we started prototyping. The second day, people broke off into teams, came up with different ideas, and then the third day we talked about those ideas and came out with a pitch. And so we came up with ideas that were pretty similar to what we had to have now. One of the things we really figured is people had kind of embraced spec identity, not just class identity anymore. And so, where the original system, I often call the classic talent trees create a class, because you're really like, you're a paladin and you're just picking. And if you want to be a retribution paladin, you don't just explicitly say that, right? You didn't say that until Cataclysm. But we felt like we had to preserve that. And we came up on a number of ideas like the gates and the 2 trees that I think have really worked well for us. It allowed us to allow players to make utility choices, not always having to pick throughput choices. And so we're pretty happy so far. Still work to do, still getting feedback. We'll never stop getting feedback. But there's still changes we'll make, in response to that.
Now, I'm curious, as someone who's played the game since its inception, one of the things I really got me down was when I tried to join a group and they look at my talent tree and say, well, right, you have 3 points in this, you can't come. Did that come up in your conversation to like make the talent trees diverse enough? Or I don't want to say not matter, but just make them have enough variety so people aren't taking you in their groups because you didn't take the 2 points in this one spell?
I think there's still going to be some people who are going to want a class to maybe have a specific tool. And so that's something we're mindful of and we're keeping an eye on. But now the game is so much about like, what's your Mythic Plus rating? What's your PvP rating?
It's your item level.
Yeah, and I feel like people are more fixated on those than necessarily inspecting your talents. Because, if you're a 2400 rated arena player and you are picking off-meta talent choices, like, who are we to question you? You've demonstrated the skill.
Right.
So I think similar things happen in Mythic Plus or even Mythic Rating, where players are kind of more looking at, what's your proven performance rather than necessarily, what choices did you make. But it's certainly something we've heard players raise concerns about, and the team did. But I have the suspicion that we're going to see not that much inspection going on. But if I'm wrong, I'm willing to listen to players telling me that.
And I think the system has some stuff built in to handle that situation pretty cleanly as well, right? In Classic, if you wanted to change your talent tree, it was hearth back to a city,
Right.
pay 50 gold,
Right.
hope you didn't misclick on the way down the tree the second time, and then get
Yeah.
summoned back. With the new system, as long as you haven't started the dungeon for a Mythic Keystone, for example, you can just change your talents right in the field. No item or gold cost associated. So if someone really has a problem that you didn't take this one thing, well, you can, fix it. It's also, as part of the process of creating the trees, going through alpha and beta, one of the things we were really listening for from players was, hey, which utility do you think is absolutely necessary? Like, what are the things that you expect this class to have no matter what? And for some of those, we rolled them into the base class, like battle reses and bloodlust type effects and those things.
Magic
That's great.
spells.
Yeah, they were in the talent tree, or in our kind of first version, because we're like, let's put everything in the tree and see what sticks. And some of those was like, no, really, you don't want to have to spend a point on that. That is an expected part of your class. Okay,
Your core
those are
toolkit.
baseline
Yeah.
now. Yeah, exactly. And also where things are positioned in the tree, right? If your interrupt is easy to find, it's easy to path to, rather. That's a big difference than if it's like off in a corner of the tree, hard to get to. So thinking about things from that angle as well.
So speaking to the Drake theory in particular, they're multi-class. They can be a healer or a mage, basically, or like a ranged damage attack. Want to get in the process of why no tank class? I feel like Earth Black Dragonflight would fit that perfectly. Did that come up in conversations at all?
Definitely came up, early on, kind of ideating what do we want this character to be about? What are the themes we want to reinforce? We knew from the very start, like, okay, ranged damage dealer. We've never added one to the game since Classic, obviously, and dragons are, full of magic. They're breathing fire across the battlefield. We really wanted to embrace that feeling of you are laying destruction across the entire environment, and ranged damage dealer kind of felt like the best way to do that. And deciding on what colors should that be of the 5 main Dragonflights, we knew we wanted to embrace, the magic of the 5. So we kind of landed on red and blue as being able to do that job really well. And then looking for a second specialization, it was, okay, we've used red and blue on the damage dealer. We have black, green, and bronze left. Green screams healer.
Yeah.
We've never explored bronze magic from a player standpoint.
What would you even do?
Yeah, and mages have a little bit, right? Alter time and time warp, but to be able to do an entire specialization that is all about time magic was like this really exciting prospect for us. And so we said, okay, we've only added one healer, Mistweaver and Mist of Pandaria, but nothing else. We've added a whole lot of tanks. Healer seems like a really cool opportunity for this class. It's still very magic focused, right? We have a ranged damage dealer, a caster, and a healer. Both of them are wielding magic. We can do a lot of the same sort of visual presentation of how are they releasing magic from themselves and spreading across the battlefield. So it was less that we don't want to do a tank and more we're really excited about the ranged damage dealer and the healer specializations.
So speaking of that, like, people love customizing, their character identity. Race identity is a real big thing in this game. But in the early concepts of Dragonflight, did you ever consider like locking, the Invoker range damage class to only blue Dragonflight, and then the healing to only red Dragonflight, and like that kind of stuff?
We talked about it a little bit. The idea of, okay, maybe what color scales you choose for your character determines what your breath attack does, right? There's something kind of attractive about that concept of really tying together the visual of your character. But going through the process, and especially watching all the customizations that our art team created for both the Drakthir form and the Visage form, it was like, I don't want to be locked to red. I don't want to be locked to green. They made a cool purple scale color. We don't have purple breath.
Right, there's no purple Dragonflight, what?
Yeah, so it really was just customization, self-expression for our players was so important that we had to separate those two and say, you can look however you want, make your character, exactly in the style that you think represents you, and then you can cast all the spells. That's just the cooler version.
Brian, talking about the Drake theory, like, obviously when you add a new race, people just say, added, but there's a ton of backend work that goes in there, specifically with just armor. And now you gave them their own unique armor. Like, talk about that process.
Yeah, the thing was, when we talked about how they were going to be shaped, how they were going to be animated, we wanted, once again, to deliver that dragon fantasy, right? Like, we wanted to be showing you all those cool customizations that you had, the spikes, the shadow, it's not the shadows, but like the what do they call the second tone?
Oh, the skin tints.
The
The
skin,
skin
yeah,
tints.
Yeah.
You know, it was wanting to capitalize on that, and really kind of deliver very draconic armor. Like there are like that whole suite of armor choices that people can make, and so it just felt like that was more about delivering that fantasy and that idea of going back and forth between your visage form and your dragon form. That we wanted to double down on that customization, and that their armor, the different armor that you have, that you acquire in the game, you know, putting that on the dragon might take a lot away from like that dragon experience and that dragon fantasy. So that was really what was behind it. I mean, Graham could probably speak to more specifics, like maybe crossroads in the development where these decisions were made. But I think, you know, that was it's always been about with the Evoker just hitting those very particular fantasy notes on being a dragon.
I think Brian hit most of it. I will say there are technical challenges with fitting a lot of the existing armor pieces to the Drakthir's body, right? Their wings and their tail punching through every chest piece you have was going to be quite a lot of work for the team to accomplish. It's something we explored, but that plus sort of the thematic elements that Brian mentioned, we think this is the right decision for the game.
You know, speaking to that, it's very interesting how the technical issues, how this game is so old and you are able to keep building off of it. Where, like, you know, most of the time, in general times, people would make a WoW 2, a WoW 3, a WoW 4, whatever, right? Because they need to start over with their architecture. It can't be done. It's so impressive what you guys are able to do with code that old. I mean, like you said, with the Drakthir Evoker specifically, like there's a lot of physics. It might be simulated physics, but there's a lot of physics in there with like the flapping and the drawing, a lot of reactive stuff. That's not easy to do.
No, I mean the code base is ever evolving, right? You know, it's funny when we look at implementations of different things in World of Warcraft, you can always see it kind of this remnant of its time, right? Like certain spells, we manage mostly with spells and abilities, and a lot of them are implemented with, you know, the way things were done, you know, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, and what tools did we have then. And it's very hard to say, oh, cool, we have this new API call for our scripting language. Go back and change all of the spells, because it's kind of a deck, you know, or a house of cards where it's like, no, that spell is working. Like, leave that spell alone until, you know, we need to change something in that spell. And a lot of other things are that way. But the team is constantly building on the code base, and this expansion is one of those times where we decided to refactor a large system, like, you know, we're refactoring the talent system, redoing the UI. All of that was a big commitment, and the team has gone in and made lots of new code, and so that code is like fresh and new. The renderer is constantly getting upgrades with lighting and whatnot. So honestly, I think it's a very mature code base. It's a very powerful code base. I think if you ask any designer on World of Warcraft, sure, like any engine, it has its idiosyncrasies and you have your pet peeves, but it's super powerful. Like, we have just such a bevy of content to create things from. It is one of the easiest games that I've ever worked on to, like, I have an idea, I want to put it in the game and see it right now. And designers can do that without needing a lot of intervention from programmers. It's almost like once you run up against something that you have to say, hey, I need an engineering task to make this thing work. So actually, it's the fact that it is old is actually a real benefit, and I think it allows us to make content as quickly, you know, as we do. And I know people still want more content faster, but
always,
you know,
yeah, always.
you can look in a lot of games, and when they come out and they're live services, it is a real challenge to get content out in quite a clip. And I think the World of Warcraft team is doing a great job of it, and always trying to improve and get content to players faster. But it is one of the strengths of the engine, in my opinion.
One little example I like is for Drakthir early on. You know, on our side, we were starting on the class and going, okay, let's develop Fire Breath. What are the abilities we want to do? Well, the character model wasn't ready yet. We didn't have the dragon form. Art was still working on it. And I went, well, what else has wings and some animations of fighting stuff? And went and grabbed one of these Stoneborn gargoyles from Revendreth from Shadowlands, and just hooked that up and said, yep, that's a Drakthir. And had gargoyles breathe fire for a little while to get that feeling of, okay, what are wings going to look and feel like in combat, and what are things we can do with them? Let's get our imaginations going before we actually had the dragon in the game. So
Yeah, getting a sense of weight to that stuff is really impressive. Like, because I mean, in a game where there are technically no physics, like with simulated physics, like you can feel weightless, but I feel the power behind every flap that they do when they do it. It's really how you guys nailed that. It felt really good.
yeah, animation team did an incredible job with that.
No, going into the racial abilities, it's funny because I absolutely love them. They feel great. In fact, when I go to another class now, I feel gimped a little bit. But like, talk about that process, because we've seen a little utility in racial abilities, but it's usually be like some kind of offensive ability, like a free silence or a stun resistance or increased reputation, maybe like escape artist, like little stuff. But they have so much movement utility in their racial abilities. Like, talk about that.
Yeah, it was a process, really having this race and class combo. The idea of a racial ability was kind of weird to a lot of people on the team. They're like, well, it's all the same, right? You're just this one character, which is true, but I think there's value in kind of the clarity of that for players of, okay, this is what comes from kind of their physical capabilities of being a Drakthir, and here's what evokers can do as these elite soldiers of the Drakthir, and separating that, right? But yeah, coming up with the racials themselves, I mean, we had a ton of ideas. People had to stop me from adding more racials because they were like, Graham, they're really good, dude. You can
They can't have 20. You have to cut it in half.
But yeah, Wing Buffet had to have it. I tried for a long time to only do Wing Buffet, and the feedback we got both internally and from people within the company playtesting was like, they have a tail. Where's their tail attack? Like, fighting Onyxia, fighting Nefarian, you always get slapped by their tail. Drakthir should do that, so had to add tail swipe and kind of find a way to make those two abilities feel different enough that you'll use them at different times. And then Soar. Soar's really the big one. Being, as dragon riding was getting developed and this new in-air locomotion system that kind of, as you said, feels really weighty. Like, the new physics capabilities of that system are far and away, beyond anything World of Warcraft has seen before. And knowing that we wanted to add that to Drakthir, that was a journey along with that, the folks working on that feature, to say, okay, how are we going to not only have the dragon riding drakes do all this cool stuff, but make sure that Drakthir kind of keep up, and how are these two going to play alongside each other in Dragonflight?
These new systems and combat mechanics, you think they'll find their way slowly? Like, I'm not asking for it tomorrow, but slowly into other classes. Like, I just like with the fire breath, I feel like that could translate well to like aim shot for a hunter, holding it down, building it up, and letting it go if you need to let it go earlier, timing it or something like that. Is that something you guys want to do in the future?
Yeah, first we wanted Empower to be this Drakthir thing. We wanted it to be, our evoker specific. Like, let's give it its time to shine. Let's let it be a thing that is unique to them and special to them. But yeah, down the line we can see it. I think one of the challenges because for what it's worth, we've always had this suggestion. Like, people have always come to me and be like, we should hold down a button and see, different levels that do things. And so that's been proposed for a while, and Drakthir was a great moment to introduce it, because you can get this weighty feeling of like building up the energy inside you and releasing it in a fire breath, and you get that physical interaction with the key of actually holding it down. And the mechanical challenge has been, why would I release it 2? Why would I release it 1? If it's just hold down for more damage, the answer is always hold to 3.
Hold max, yeah.
Hold to max. And so we want it to be more interesting than that, right? We want there to be times where you're like, yeah, I want to let go at 1, or I want to let go at 2. So I think the things that Graham and his team have done thus far with Flame Breath, do you want it to be, just hit it quick for it to get out the fire, and the fight is going to last a long time, keep the dots up for a while? Or do you want to hold it longer to make it a real bursty spell that has a lot much more uploaded damage? Like, those are the choices you would make in different situations, right? Like, is it a pack of mobs in a dungeon, and I think a lot of them are going to be up, or a boss that I'm fighting in a raid, and I think there's going to be high uptime? I don't need to commit combat time to being empowered. I just, bring it to 1, let it get out, go on my way, do the rest of my rotation. But if it's, let's say, an AoE pack in a Mythic Plus and I've got a Havoc Demon Hunter and a warrior who are blade storming and trying to kill those things as fast as possible, I'm going to want to, you know, hold it down, get a real burst amount of damage out there to try and break that pack down quickly. So I think that's in the Eternity Surge is the other one where it's how many targets are you actually fighting? That makes it an interesting decision. And so finding those types of interactions where you really are like my question is always like, why am I letting this go at 2?
Yeah.
You know, not just 1, not just 3, but 2. And so where are those in other classes, right? Because aim shot, as an example, right? For aim shot, it's like, you know, if it's all about I'm pulling back the quiver and letting go
For one target. Yeah.
For one target, like that can be a cast, right? But yeah, what are the scenarios like you said? Maybe it's number of targets, how many arrows am I notching, or how many bullets am I loading before I fire? I see you gun hunters.
I like the pet aspect. So much fun.
Yes. So those are the interesting mechanical nuances that we want to find with empowered spells as we use them in the future.
And then my last question is favorite Dragonflight aspect and why?
Oh, we picked our background, didn't we?
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you pick your background or they generated? Because we have magic.
No, I picked
time.
it, but it was primarily like, well, Rathian really makes me look pale, so I'm going to pick, Caligos here, who's got the same skin tone as me, and it doesn't reveal how little sun I've gotten lately. So,
I think obviously Alex Straza, big fan. Everything she does, I'm like, yes, you're making a good choice. Yes. I believe in you. But also, yeah, definitely my boy Nozdormu. Like, time magic is just so cool. Like, any game, not even, World of Warcraft, others, I'm like, if you give me time magic, I'm excited about it. I want to know more. So, yeah, always a fan of Nozdormu.
Awesome, guys. And that's time. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Tobias. I appreciate it. You guys have a good rest of your day doing interviews, and I can't wait to jump in on November 28th. Excuse me.
Thanks, Greg. Good talking to you.
Thanks, guys.